I'm really glad to be here this morning, and I appreciate you all deciding to take the time to join us. I know it's a busy time of year and you probably have lots going on, so I really appreciate you making the time to be here. And at Vantage Point, our vision is that every community mindfully engages passionate citizens. So that is really what we are all about, and what we spend a lot of time thinking and working on. And Lee has given you a little bit of an idea of what Vantage Point does as well. I will say that we didn't coordinate our hashtags, and so I have a hashtag on this presentation, and I know that there's also a hashtag CV webinar, so I'm hoping that you all will be able to use both of those as we go over the next hour or so. So this is a little bit about what I have planned for the next little while. We have been working on this idea of an abundant not-for-profit for about the last decade or so, thinking about it, talking with organizations, working with leaders in organizations, experimenting in our own organization, learning tons of lessons, having some successes and also some failures. And now we think we have an idea that we think will bring abundance to your organization. So that's what I'll be talking about with you today. Today's session is really a taste, so we are actually releasing a book on this topic next year in January, and so the idea today is to pique your interest, to share with you some of the ideas and concepts that we've developed, and try and make it as interactive as possible. So I do have some questions and opportunity for you to feedback to me as well. And I'm also going to provide some concrete tools and ideas and resources with you as much as possible so that you have some concrete takeaways from today. So over the next hour, the idea is to, I will talk about this idea of abundance, abundant talent. We'll go through some of the myths that potentially can interfere with going to a place of abundance. And then introduce the concept of a people lens, which I will tell you more about at that time. And also share with you some checklists, resources, and templates that you can actually put into use right away. And then talk about how to take action right away after the session. So that's just to give you an idea of what to expect over the next hour or so. And you'll see there at the bottom our handle and our hashtag, and also Charity Village. My guess is you know their handle, but it's at Charity Village, and then hashtag CV webinar. So hoping that we can just hammer the social media channels with all of that information. Okay, so I'd like to actually begin by talking about you. You are all, each of you on this call, doing incredible work in your community, in your city or province, wherever you are. And it's really, in my view, the most important work that exists, the positive change that you are working to create. And our sector and our organizations are really incredibly unique. So sometimes that means there are some constraints that we work with. You know, by very definition, not-for-profits have many, many stakeholders, and that means lots of different opinions and sometimes conflicting priorities. There are certainly cash flow pressures that we encounter, and scrutiny about how we spend our money, and these days increasing pressure to measure and report the impact that we have. And there's obviously huge change going on as well in funding and technology and all the things that affect us, including volunteerism. So those are some of the pieces that make us unique. And on the other hand, we also have an opportunity that other sectors don't have, and that is the ability to recruit and engage volunteers. And it might be obvious, but I think we sometimes kind of take it for granted. We don't think about it all that much, that other sectors really can't do that. Government and corporations can't really invite people to come and work for them for free and have that really impact their business model. And yet, so we really feel like it's the sector's competitive advantage that we can engage talented people and pay them with other things than cash. I will suggest to you that this, as a sector on the whole, we're not really fully taking advantage of that just yet. Now, if you tune out when I said the word volunteer, you need to know that I'm not talking about the person that you might have in mind. So, many organizations do a very good job of working with volunteers in a kind of a traditional way that I think as a sector we're very good at that, and they provide tremendous value to our organizations. But the ways that that works and the kinds of volunteers that are coming to us are changing, and we can extend what we're doing in new ways. So I'm talking about the volunteer with skills and talent and expertise that wants a time-limited opportunity to make a difference. So I'm actually talking about the person that can be your marketing strategist, who can design and deliver your executive director performance review, who can manage that IT project that you just can't really seem to get off the ground, or coach your leadership team through a strategic planning process. So these kind of critical projects that are right now sitting on the side of your desk, I'm talking about people that can actually get those things done for you. So this is Vancouver, where I am right now. It actually looks somewhat like this today. It's kind of amazing. But I invite you to think of your city or your town where you are, and just bear with me for a moment. Think about kind of floating above that city where you are and look down at it. I mean, this is a snapshot of one part of our city, but if you go way, way, way up and look at all the complete Lower Mainland or the province or the country, and think about all the people who live in the buildings that you see there and all the skills and experience and value of the people in all of those buildings with those skills that I talked about. Strategic planners, writers, facilitators, designers, all kinds of people that most organizations could not afford to pay with money. So what I'm saying is that you actually can hire those people, the best, the most talented people, and pay them differently with what they're actually looking for, which is the opportunity to make a meaningful difference, to connect with people that are like-minded, to learn, to use their skills. And ultimately what many of these people are looking for is an opportunity to be part of creating the collective solutions and the positive change that we're all working on. And there are many people like that that are looking for ways into your organization, into your cause right now, today. And we're missing a lot of those opportunities. So before I go any further, we have a little poll for you. And pretend maybe Lee, you can launch the first poll. So I kind of want to just take your temperature a little bit and see if you've had any of these experiences. So
this is the poll. Do you know of someone with a high level of professional skills and experience who, correct?
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I can't see that, but I'm glad you all can. So the question is, what I'd like you to do is actually have you check off which of those experiences you've had. So the first one is the experience of meeting someone and thinking, that person could make a really huge difference for us, and I wish that they would work with us, but I don't really know how to make that happen. So that's the first one. The second is, if you can think of someone that is really talented who has approached your organization and been interested in being involved, but you've struggled with how to engage them. So you didn't have a volunteer role readily available, and they really wanted to work with you, but you weren't really sure what to do. And then the third one is, can you think of someone already working with your organization who you know has talent that you're not fully engaging? So maybe they're a board member, or maybe they're working with you in a different way, and you know that they have skills that they're not contributing. If you've had that experience, you can check the third, and you can check all three if all three apply. Maybe Lee, you can share.
Yeah, I got a couple. We'll wait a couple more seconds so we can have more people participate. And while they're doing that, I think one of those things, it sort of applies to that rule of fundraising. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself here, but sometimes it's like if people aren't asked, right? Like you think of someone, but you don't make that first sort of ask, or you don't know what to offer to someone, right? So I think these are some things you're probably going to talk about over the session today, but how to have that conversation and really engage someone in the work of your organization on a meaningful level, right? So. Okay, so we've had the majority of people that participated, so I will just close down the poll now at this point and share the results with everyone. So we have 68% saying that they wish someone who would volunteer for you because of their talent. 53% of respondents have said that they have asked to volunteer, and you can't find you've had a volunteer ask and you can't find a role for them. And 32% of participants have said that they have someone who is volunteering with you now that you're not using their skills to their full capacity.
Wonderful. Thanks for responding, everybody. So I think that is a good temperature check. It does tell me that some of these things, you are thinking about some of these things, and you've had these experiences of, knowing there's an opportunity there and not necessarily knowing how to put it into action or actually have it impact your organization. So thank you for participating in that. So the next thing I'd like to do is kind of say, well, so what? What does this mean for your organization? What were you thinking as you were answering these questions? I think that I'll tell you a quick story, and just to lead into the next thing that we're going to do. We work with what we call a knowledge philanthropist, who is one of our facilitators. And he told me a story recently. I'll just paint the picture for you a little bit about who he is. He actually he has a doctorate, a PhD in leadership and policy. And over the last couple of decades, he's been an adjunct professor at UBC, a superintendent at a number of school districts, and he also was the executive director of the School Leadership Center at UBC. So he recently retired and began looking for opportunities to contribute to community. And he approached a number of organizations, and the first two organizations that he had a conversation with they both coincidentally offered him a role answering their phone at their front desk. They didn't ask him about his background, they didn't ask for his resume, they didn't ask what kind of experience he was looking for. And I think, it's not because there's no ill intentions there. They're busy, they really require their phone answered. So someone comes along and says, I want to work with you, and they say, great, can you answer the phone? But the tragedy is they were really unaware of his really deep experience and the level of expertise that he could offer to the organization. So he answered their phone a couple of times, and then he continued his search and eventually started to work with us as a facilitator. And he also is now a workforce training specialist at the Canadian Red Cross. So these are the kinds of stories that I want to that we hear all the time, that really demonstrate kind of a hugely missed opportunity, and luckily he persevered and kept going and found what he was looking for. But for those organizations, they missed a potentially really powerful opportunity to engage someone with high level of skills. So that's kind of the missed opportunity that we're one example of what we're trying to highlight. Okay, so we're going to do one more poll, back to back here. Lee, if you can go ahead and launch that next one.
Yeah.
And so this is really another question around what were you thinking as we're talking about all of these people these talented people that could contribute to your organization. Did any of these things cross your mind? And is it kind of what's true in your organization? Because I think sometimes there's what we think and kind of our underlying assumptions, and then there's a culture that exists at the organizations that we're working with or engaged with that is can be a barrier or can kind of be an underlying assumption that interferes with our ability to engage talented people. So the first one there, do people at your organization think volunteers are kind of unreliable? They don't really necessarily always do what they say they're going to do. And is there kind of a thought of you can't really give volunteers too much responsibility because they may or may not come through? And what about the feeling that basically salaried employees are going to do a better job? If you pay people with money, they're gonna come through more effectively. That they're more qualified to do that. Is that idea alive in your organization? And what about people's motivations? Is it unrealistic to think that people have other motivations than money? Do the people that you work with, every day, do they think that people really are the reason that they would want to work with you is for money? And then what about this one? Asking people to offer their skills is taking advantage of them. Are you always asking for things and kind of feel like, oh man, I just don't want to ask for one more thing from from someone without being able to pay for it? Or are you saying, yeah, I've had this experience. At my organization, we often engage many volunteers to deliver significant work with great results. So what's your experience? And you can check as many of those as apply. Even if you don't think these things are true, have you seen this play out in your organization? Do you think there's kind of an underlying assumption there that you see in the culture?
Just a reminder that the poll is completely anonymous too, so we can't tie it back to who's doing it. You're not going to feel like you're calling anyone out. And I think as soon as I said that, participation has shot up. So but just a reminder, yeah, we're not tracking anything. We can't see who's saying what. So answer it candidly and honestly, and we can go from there.
This is really just to see, again, what's going on in your organization.
Perfect. Like, I have a good number now, so I think I'm going to shut it down so that we can see the results.
Great. Thanks,
and then, Lynda, are you able to see the results when I hit that? Or do you want me to?
I can. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
I'll wait for you to
Thank you.
I'll share the results.
This is very interesting. Okay, so and actually this is really useful to me in terms of what we focus on in the next little while. So accountability looks like that one is had the most response, and then the next two a little bit less, and the last two more so. I'm glad to see that almost 50% of you are successfully engaging highly skilled volunteers in your organization. That's great, and says, it's it's interesting. I'd love to know more about what that looks like, and this format makes that a little more challenging than usual, but we'll get there.
Lynda, maybe if anyone has any insights and things that they're doing well, you can share them in the comment screen, and maybe we can go through those in the chat box with the questions and then go from there.
Fantastic.
Perfect. So I'll shut this down now, and you can carry on with the...
Great. So thank you very much for being honest about all those things. Accountability, I'll make sure we'll do some significant talking about that piece in the next little while. So we wanted to put those on the table just to say that these are some of the myths or the assumptions or underlying kind of cultural pieces that can interfere with getting to a place of abundance. And really it is about starting with culture and kind of identifying what is the culture saying right now, your organizational culture, and then what would need to shift in order to do this. So in an abundant not-for-profit, there's really not a lot of difference in the way that salaried and volunteer team members are treated and the way that they act and the kind of work that they do. Each of them brings a unique piece of the puzzle to the organization, and everybody's contribution is valuable. What I'd like to do is just look a little bit more closely at each of these myths. So, we know that society believes that volunteers are not accountable. That's a pretty prevalent kind of idea, and I think that was reflected in your responses to that poll. So, I guess my question is, what happens in your organization if volunteers don't show up, or if they don't do what they say they're going to do, or don't deliver with excellence? And you can build accountability, and we'll talk about, my goal in the next 45 minutes or so is to give you some tools to actually address some of these things. But really this piece is about setting clear expectations up at the very front. So we'll talk about creating strong processes, including clear timelines and descriptions of what the work is to be done. And we've created a bunch of what we call parameter setting documents for each volunteer we work with that outlines all the details and who they're accountable to. So these are position descriptions or terms of reference for task forces, and letters of agreement with every volunteer. So it really is about creating a contract that lays out accountability, just as you would with a consultant that you were paying with money, and often builds in check-in points along the way as well. The other piece that's a little bit sometimes uncomfortable to talk about is about, we call it freeing up people's future. So the idea that if a volunteer is not accountable, they get turfed, and that your salaried employees have to be empowered to do that and to have the skills and support to actually do that in a kind and empathetic but effective way. So we'll talk a bit more about that, and I hope if you have questions, we'll put them into the questions box so Lee can throw them at me as we go. This next piece is really about, is there an explicit acknowledgement that volunteers can bring as much expertise as salaried employees, or even an expertise that doesn't exist on your team right now? We often work in small organizations. Many of us wear many different kinds of hats and are generalists, really, and so there are often kind of skill sets. Here we actually don't have an HR expert. We don't have and we have an IT. We have recently added an IT person to the team, but there are lots of skill sets that just we don't exist in our small team of 8, our paid salary team, and so it's about really explicitly being comfortable with saying we don't know everything, and we don't have all the skills required, and being kind of confident and able to, and not threatened by talented people coming into the organization to work with us, and actually potentially thriving on that opportunity to learn and to engage people that know things that we don't know. This piece is kind of interesting too. So do people in your organization believe that money is really the most powerful motivator? Or are they really aware of other motivations that people have? It is important to say that everybody requires enough money to live, and we do get that. So we're not saying, not-for-profits don't require money or people should not be paid. Like, that's not where we're going. But the fact is that many talented people are motivated by, they do have a job or a way to pay to live, and what they're actually looking for is exactly what we can give them, which is a connection to a cause that they care about, a chance to make a difference, an opportunity to learn or grow, all those things that we talked about. So the key is really to find out what each person's motivation is, and then create an opportunity that provides what they're looking for. And then this last piece here this actually came out of a conversation I had with an executive director who really couldn't understand why there was a marketing expert that wanted to work with her, and she was having a hard time kind of wrapping her head around it. And then she started to talk. I said, well, why do you like working at, she works at an arts organization. Why do you like working? Oh, yeah, I guess it's kind of cool. We get to hang around with actors, and we get to, I love the work that we do, and we put on great performances, and I like being around here, so of course that makes sense that he would as well. But it took a while to kind of get there. So, are you aware of the value of your organization and the cool work that you're doing and why people might want to get in on it? I think we sometimes take it for granted because it's kind of in the water and in the air that we breathe, but it is about creating a win-win and actually offering people an opportunity that they're looking for rather than begging them to work with us. So, these are really, really prevalent attitudes, and it really is about creating societal change. But what I want to suggest is if you start to identify which myths exist in your organization, and hopefully you've started that today, then you can lead some conversations about them, and the rest of this webinar will also provide some concepts and tools that ensure that these myths don't create your reality at your organization. Okay, are there any questions there, Lee, that we can get to, or?
Well, I have one in terms of like I chair a board of a small organization. We have 2 paid staff, and our programs are all run by volunteers. And I think it's one of these things and we recently sort of gone through this shift where you're going through these things and really matching someone with something like what can they do and finding a meaningful way for them to sort of fit in. But then the flip side of that is like if you have that volunteer who has a skill set that you don't need, you get that kind of stuff that someone wants to help you with something, but you just how do you I like that term you said about freeing up their future. But how do you sort of say, well, this is great, but you're not really a good fit for what we're doing. Like, so sort of that maybe like redirecting someone on their journey. Like, I don't know if you're going to address that later on, but that's something that we kind of, because we have a really great program with kids and youth. People are really excited about it, but we're also like, it takes like a special kind of volunteer to do that.
So. Absolutely, and that's a great point that I wasn't, that is not in my notes. So I think that, it really does always have to be about the mission, and like we are not fans or advocates of just engaging volunteers for the sake of it, which I think sometimes as a sector we've done a little bit of, and I don't think it serves anybody really well. So I would say sometimes it does have to be about there isn't a fit right now, and especially with people that aren't yet working with your organization, that's a little easier. Often if they are really talented, and particularly if your plans, we'll talk about some of the elements that make it possible to do this a little more easily, but for instance, if you know where you're going and you have some plans in place, then it's a lot easier to think about how could this person contribute and how would their skills fit with where we're going. But if they don't, then they don't, and sometimes it's a skills fit, and sometimes it's a cultural fit or an attitude fit, and I think ultimately it does have to be about mission delivery as the primary goal.
Yeah.
And then everything, but it is that piece can be tough for sure.
Yeah, and just another question has come through, and this is something that I was going to throw out myself, but Jane Garthson, who actually puts together our monthly ethics and governance Q&A on Charity Village, is on the call today, and has a comment about that. She's told that often committees, it's like committees, so people volunteering on committees, sometimes there's that lack of accountability when you're involving more. You have that, you talked about giving people an individual work plan or their own sort of volunteer agreements, but when you're working on a committee, so if they don't have terms of reference, if they aren't clear about what the committee's established, she says it's no wonder that they're not achieving their results that the ED or board chairman have hoped for. So maybe that's that piece too, like, how do the volunteers work together? And I think she brings up a great point about the importance of those terms of reference and the expectations, because, I've experienced it where some committees they flounder because there's no sort of direction or.
Absolutely. And that's not a fun experience for volunteers, generally speaking, either. But it does happen a lot. I would say we're pretty firm about most committees having an end date, like being a committee that has a particular purpose and has a timeline, and then that's it. And we have had, we had an IT committee that we pulled together a couple years ago to look at our database, and they did what they were supposed to do. They looked at all the options and recommended one, and some of the people worked on implementation with us and stuff like that. And once that project was complete, there were a couple people on the team who said, we really want to continue to work with, we want this task force basically to keep going. And we basically had to say, well, no, like it's, the work is done and the task force is disbanded, and that's, maybe there'll be a fit with your skills on an individual role or some other way in the future, but pretty much this task force is the work is done. And so I think we fall into that mistake a little bit sometimes, where we have task forces that kind of go on and on and on, and sometimes the structure of organizations necessitate that, particularly if it's a largely volunteer-run organization. But then for sure, terms of reference with kind of deliverables and responsibilities, and definitely a line of accountability to one individual who's responsible are hugely important. And we have I'll share with you some templates and stuff to put those things in place.
Great.
Thanks so much. Okay, so let's get on to the next piece of this, which is to introduce you to the concept of a people lens. So our goal really is to build strong organizations that can effectively engage all the untapped talent that we talked about. So we've coined a phrase called a people lens to describe how organizations can do what we're talking about. And a people lens, our definition is a people lens is a way to attract, meaningfully engage, and integrate the abundance of talent available. And we do feel like it's a really overlooked path to organizational sustainability. We think it can be a game changer for organizations and for the sector, and definitely a critical strategy for the long-term health and success of organizations, because it can increase resources and kind of community ownership of the organization by looking at your mission through a people lens rather than a financial or budgetary lens first. Now, this might sound really obvious, somewhat simple, and it's definitely not. And I think for those of you that checked off some of those, things, the questions in the first poll, you know that it's harder than it sounds as well. But you know, the talent that we're thinking about there, the facilitator that I described, those talented people really do equate to money in the long game, but we don't really see talent that way as a critical resource which enables us to meet our missions. So that's the road that I'm going to take you down today. So this is what a people lens looks like. I hope that it looks like a lens to you. That's kind of what it's intended to be. And in the middle is your mission. So the positive change that you're trying to create, the valuable work that you're doing. And around the lens are the 5 areas that we believe are required in order to effectively engage all of that talent that exists. So it really is about structuring your organization for success by creating excellence in these 5 areas. And then that allows you to capture all of the talent available and align it to deliver your mission. So this is our, and I'll go into each one of these pieces in a little bit more detail for you. And you know, fair warning, this is not necessarily really easy to do. It's organizational change work. Well, actually, it's societal change work, but for sure, organizational change work. And you know, you all are doing change work, so you know that's not easy. But the good news is, if you build it, they will come. It really will no longer be about finding volunteers. People will be attracted to your organization, come knocking on your door, and bring incredible joy to your work and unthought of ideas and resources in the door. So this is the road that you've started on by joining us today. Okay, are there questions at this stage, Lee, or should I keep going into the 5 areas?
I think you can just keep going into the areas for now.
All
and
right.
we can pick up some comments later.
Great. So what we've learned and what we talked about a little bit with the myths is that it really does start with culture. That you have to build a strong organization first. And so each of these pieces, I'll talk about kind of what a strong organization looks like, and then what is unique to a people lens organization. And so the first thing is to build a culture that values people first. And you know, that sounds really nice, and lots of people will say to us, oh yeah, that's us, we value people first. And our next question is, so do you present a people plan to your board annually? Or what is it that you present to your board? And almost without fault, we then go to a place of money, the budget that goes to the board on an annual basis. And so the focus first in most organizations really is on financial resources. And we believe you have to reverse that and really implement different ways of working in order to demonstrate the focus on people. And so in a people lens organization, the focus is on people and their talent. And it's about all of the people that could potentially contribute to your organization, the talent of the salaried employees and the talent of the volunteers. Treating everyone as equal but different contributors to the organization, and creating an integrated kind of one workforce model where everybody is part of one team.
Lynda, I think that's really new for a lot of organizations to sort of think of volunteers and paid staff in that kind of hybrid model. Because you know, in typical organizations I've seen, where it's been like you have a volunteer manager who keeps care of the volunteers, and they have a specific set of tasks, and then paid staff do something else. And this is really, you're meshing those together and really looking at the outcomes first, and then whether you're paid or unpaid almost becomes irrelevant in terms of getting the work done, right?
Absolutely, that's exactly right. But it is, and I will say that this can exist alongside a traditional volunteer program. So we're not saying, you know, you have to completely, well, you do have to change what you're doing, but it's not about like stopping doing things. It's an addition to potentially what you're doing already. You know, it can be it probably took us, I would say it probably took us 10 years to get all the way through it, and we didn't really know where we were going. So we're hoping that we can save you at least 5 years. But it does take a while to put all these pieces in place and to make those kinds of shifts. But it's, you know, in terms of mission delivery and resources, the results are pretty incredible. So I'll ask you, on each of these pieces, I'm going to give you a kind of two concrete things that you can ask and then potentially implement to move in this direction. So on the culture piece, the question is, do you have recruitment and onboarding processes for everyone in your organization that really introduces them to your culture and values that are unique? So do you make people aware of your culture before they join? And for example, at our place with paid employees, in our 3-month review process, we do actually we provide feedback around and actually we review people based on both their job performance and their demonstration of the organization's culture and values. So both are kind of equally weighted. And then going back to accountability in your culture, what happens when someone doesn't fit? Are you able to move them along? Are your employees empowered and supported to terminate people? And does that include volunteers? So that's that first piece. This is going to be, this is a real quick and dirty, so I hope it's not too overwhelming. I'm happy to answer any questions and also afterwards. I just wanted to give you the overview, so I'm hoping that that's not too much all at once. So the second area is planning, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit, that it is about having a planning culture. It's very difficult if you're always being reactive to engage a lot of people. So it is about planning strategically towards annual goals. Strong organizations do that really well, and then people-led organizations also have this people plan. Even before they start to look at the annual budget, they plan all of the people and skills required to do all of the tasks, and then they figure out what do they have in their salaried team and who can they recruit from the community. So that really allows employees to engage greater number of people in their work without always having to increase financial resources because they've planned to do that. And on this piece, you can ask yourself, when you develop your annual strategic plan, does it look at all the people you have in the organization now and the people you'll require to carry out the plan? And is that presented to the board? Do you chunk your work into discrete projects so that employees can engage others in their work? So that's kind of the first question. And then the second question is around succession planning. So do you look to develop future leaders and plan for the next wave of talent, both in your salaried employees and your volunteers? And if your volunteers are playing key roles that are essential to mission delivery, what happens when they leave? Do they have key documents in place, and is there a kind of a pipeline of talent that you can recruit from? Governance. This is a fun one. So, strong organizations have boards that understand what their role is and strive for good governance. And people-led boards really are keepers of that culture. They demonstrate that people are the #1 resource before money. And we talk a lot about this concept of wearing 2 different hats as a board member, that there's a governance hat where the executive director is accountable to you, to the board chair in particular, and then when board members take operational roles in the organization, that they actually they are accountable to a salaried employee at that point in that role. And there is a role description and a letter of agreement and very explicit agreement about that, so that everybody knows who's accountable to who at what time, and board members kind of go back and forth between that operational role and the governance role. That's quite different than often happens. There's a lot of confusion around this in the sector, and so I would say that's a key differentiator in a people-led organization.
I think that's a great point too, because for example, we have some of our board members who become camp staff at our summer programs, and there's a clear line of reporting there that they want to be engaged in the programs, but during the time that they are summer camp staff, they're reporting to our staff member.
Right.
So the reporting relationship is reversed, and that could potentially be a conflict. And we've developed a very clear guidelines and processes to say, when you're acting in this capacity, this is the kinds of things you're working on. Because those lines are very gray sometimes, and they want to give and be contributors, but sometimes that line between governance and operations it's a gray area sometimes, right?
It is. And it's where a lot of messiness happens. When things are going well, it's really great and there's no issues, but it's when things are
when things are
going
a little bit,
sideways.
absolutely. Uh, Before you continue, Jane has another comment. About
Great.
talking about volunteer managers and things. She's seen examples where volunteer managers will spend more time orienting summer students than board members, and a lot of times HR and volunteer managers think that the board is outside of their job scope in terms of volunteering. So I'm just bringing it up now as you're talking about governance, but
Oh yeah.
that I think I've seen it too, where they're seen as a different kind of volunteer, and what that could be a good thing or a bad thing. And I think sometimes the staff don't know how to approach their board, how to make sure that their board knows what's going on.
Exactly. And what the lines of accountability are when they're working with them in a non-governance way, right? But yes, the point about the volunteer manager is well taken, and I think really what this model assumes that everyone in the organization, and particularly the leadership of the organization, is really invested and prioritizes working with volunteers themselves. So that means board members, includes board members, includes the executive director, includes any senior leadership salaried employees, and potentially other people in the organization as well, so that there can be a role for sure still for administrator, manager, or volunteer resources, but often they are not the only person responsible, and often the executive director will be the first point of contact for a volunteer, and potentially will work with them or will filter them to whoever is appropriate in the organization. So it really is about taking down those walls and really destroying the silo of volunteer engagement.
Great.
I don't know if that speaks to the point there, but I
think it's also the assumption that people tend to think that that's outside of their scope, right? To think of their board members that way. So yeah, good point.
Yeah, and it's also about, that is a lot about culture, right? What's a priority, and is it valuable to spend time in that way, and whose time should be spent in that way? All those questions.
There's an additional comment here from Jillian Witt. She says an additional challenge for a number of community-based organizations is that volunteers are also your constituency, your local residents. It's important to make it clear the difference between being a volunteer at your organization versus being an engaged person in your own community. So it's a great point.
Absolutely, that's huge. Yeah. We could go down that road a long time. I think that's a very rich conversation. And yes, tricky for sure. But I think, again, I think if you always come back to mission delivery and focus on the mission, then some of those answers become really clear, even if they're hard to actually execute, or you have to be creative about how you do that. Okay. Two more. So processes, which we've talked a little bit about already today. So it really is incredibly important for the organization to have solid processes for recruiting, onboarding, working with both salaried employees and volunteers. And sometimes it's a bit of an overload what we have going on at our place, but everybody sticks to them, follows them. All of the employees that have come to work with us over the last, 6 or 8 years have added to them. And we have a lot of templates and examples on our resources page on our website, which I'll share with you in a few minutes. So it really is about enabling everybody to work as one integrated team and creating all the roles with equal expectations of accountability and excellence. So this piece about the People Lens organization is about this integrated team and equal expectations, no matter how you're being paid by the organization. And so the questions here are, do you have defined and consistent recruitment processes for both salaried employees and volunteers? What are your processes around when volunteers approach the organization? Do they ever meet with the executive director? Is that a possibility? Do you have a proactive process to go out and identify and attract particular talent? And do you have a reactive process about what happens when people come to you? And then do you have these documents in place that provide clarity and expectations? we have a lot of resources on this side of things, so definitely happy to share those with you. And then the last one is leadership. Strong organizations do have leaders that focus on leading others rather than doing all the work. And that is quite different because, often the way it works is that people who are really good at doing things get to be the leader, and then they keep on doing things. And what we've learned is that leaders really have to lead other people to get the work done, rather than doing it themselves all the time. And so in people-lens organizations, the skills that are really, the leadership competencies that are really important are the ability to connect, convene, and delegate. And delegation is, we could do an hour just on that by itself, but it really is about being able to effectively involve other talented people, and sometimes manage up, or engage people that have skill sets that you don't have, or expertise that you don't have. And it's definitely a particular skill set. So the questions here are, is volunteer engagement stated as a role requirement for all leadership employees and board members? And we have examples of the kinds of things that you could start to include in job descriptions. And then what kind of competencies do you look for in your employees to be able to do this? And this assumes that it's not just a manager or volunteer, manager or volunteers that is responsible for volunteer engagement. So those are the 5 areas that we have been thinking about continuing to refine and examine really closely: culture, planning, governance, good people processes, and leadership, all to deliver the mission. And we have been working with a number of organizations across the country that are putting this into action. So we have a bunch of stories that we'll share in the book, and we're gathering those as well. Wellspring Calgary is one of those organizations that we'll highlight, and there's quite a detailed story there about how they've made this transition or are making it. And I thought what Patty had to say about, why would you do this? This is kind of the big picture, what it's all about. Building civil society and engaging all the people that are interested in working with us. So I'm conscious. I think I'll save that story for another time because I want to make sure that I get to some of these last pieces here, and I'm conscious we have about 10 minutes left. So this is a screenshot of our resource center, which we are, it's in redevelopment, so it will be improving over the next little while, but this is what it currently looks like. And there are a lot of resources there around, so the board engagement pack, the volunteer engagement pack, volunteer handbook, staff volunteer engagement handbook, all of these templates and tools that you can access that will provide, just take what works for you, ditch what doesn't. You definitely don't have to do exactly what we're doing, but hopefully you don't have to start from scratch either, and you can build off what we've created. And those are all available to you, and we'll be adding to them over the next little while. Are there questions, Lee, or shall I?
Yeah, I think just keep going through it. There's a couple other comments which I can say for the end there. But,
okay, great. So I just want to have you think about this question for a minute or two, and that is, what do you, to kind of go back to the big picture a little bit, or how this relates to the work that you're doing. So my question really is, what do you want to ignite over the next year? What new campaigns or projects or initiatives are you dreaming about for 2013? And I would like to actually invite you to jot a few of those down on your paper, and I'd actually love for you to jot a few down in the questions box just to share them with us, and hopefully Lee can read through some of the ones that come in, because it really is thinking about what do you know is mission critical and you don't have the budget to get done. Maybe it's keeping you awake at night, or it's been sitting on the side of your desk and you just it's on hold until you have the money to get it done. At Vantage Point, we engage all kinds of people. We call them knowledge philanthropists. So I'll add that that word to your slide here. And they play all kinds of roles with us. So this year they have, here are some examples. They have designed the book that we are writing. They have done a business analysis of our membership model and made some recommendations around that. Facilitated our strategic planning sessions. group created an outcomes evaluation process and template for all of our learning opportunities. And in 2011, they actually played 265 different roles with us. So that's our staff team of 8, engaging over 200 people in 265 different customized roles. So I'll ask you again, what are you looking to ignite in 2013? What consultant would you hire if you suddenly had the money?
I think there's a couple that have come through already. One,
Great.
I think they're pretty timely too, is like the development of a social media strategy.
Yes.
And then, a major website overhaul, like things that you need to do to, completely overhaul.
Yep.
Those are big projects. And these are great too, because I think it goes back to your previous point about it being like, okay, those are things that we can lump together and they can be time sensitive. You find someone who will give you the strategy, show you how to do it, and then you run with it afterwards.
Absolutely. And the website is a great example. We actually redid our website with a team of knowledge philanthropists earlier this year, and we had a team, 3 user experience experts or user design. Sometimes you don't even know what these people are, like I didn't know what they were called, the kind of skill that they had. So we had to talk to a few people in the industry and find out, like, who are we actually looking for? And then we also engaged a designer and a project manager to actually execute their recommendations. So that was a really, that was a very successful, and it was we did it on no budget, which was fairly incredible when you think about it.
There's another significant one coming here. Someone establishing a customer service philosophy and penetrating the entire organization, which is 2,800 volunteers. So
love it.
That's a huge project, and I think that's one of those things where you need to think about it, and you're right, leverage the resources to do it, and think about it from this people lens perspective.
Love it.
I'll share one, like personally, again, the organization I'm chairing, we're coming up to our 10th anniversary, and we're looking for someone to do some video work to sort of document some of our participants who've come through the program over the 10 years. Where are they now? Where are the impacts? So like reconnecting with some of our participants and documenting that and really making a nice little 10-minute video that we can share at our anniversary celebration and sort of post on the website. I don't have the video editing skills. Someone out there does.
Yeah.
And we can connect into the great stories, but I want it done well, and I want it done really nicely. And so that's one of the big projects that we're going to work on this year. And
I love it.
Some of the things that you heard today.
That's great. And just to that last point, like I think what I would say there is one of the things that we talk about with people that are going down this road is the real requirement to have very high expectations. So sometimes I think we put position descriptions out there, videographer is a perfect example. We might get a student or someone that kind of wants to learn how to do video, and we think, okay, well, that's good. They're willing to do it and they have the equipment, so, let's do it. Or, one other example was really an organizational consultant. One of the executive directors we were working with wanted to restructure her organization, really. And she had a number of applicants. And she was like, oh, I guess they could do the job, but she wasn't really convinced. And I think sometimes we go there just because we think it's the best that we can get. And we really pushed her to be very, we wanted her to really believe that this person would do an incredibly, excellent job. And she did get someone who did that. And when he presented his recommendations to her board, they were blown away. So, to really go down this road in a successful way, you have to find those people who will deliver amazing, amazing results and really only hire the very best people. And we actually have the ability to do that rather than just kind of take what we can get, which I think
not time to settle is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, we settle. We do. So I'm saying don't. You don't have to. Okay, so clearly this is 1 hour, and I hope I've given you some concrete takeaways. But really what I want is for you to be just open to the possibility that this can create amazing results. So, believe that there are people out there that want to make a difference and that have amazing skills and expertise to offer. And really what I'm asking is for you to focus on the abundance of talent that exists rather than the scarcity of volunteers. So think about one person that you've met that would like to involve, take them for coffee, ask for their resume, find out what they want to do in 2013, what are they looking for, what kind of experience would really, bring them alive and would also contribute to your organization, and see if you can't create that role for them. or come at it from the other direction, create a role and go out there and find someone who can do it that you haven't before thought about as a voluntary position. And they will make your jobs incredibly fun and much easier and bring incredible ideas through the door. So these are a few of the things that are coming, ways that you can access more information. So the book will be coming out next year. I do invite you to subscribe to our blog where we talk about all these kinds of things. And our resources page, please go there and download whatever you need. If you have questions or you're looking for something specific and you can't find it, absolutely email me. And I would also love to know any stories that are out there about people learning in this area or doing things really well. We still are madly adding stories to our books, so if you send me something really good, I might incorporate it. And we really are going to be telling a lot of stories in 2013 about organizations that are trying to do this, all the learning that they're having, the successes and the lessons that they're learning. So that's pretty much everything I have planned, and I don't know if we have time for a few questions or if there are any, Lee.
I have one from earlier in terms of it was a comment from Jillian from earlier talking about she met with an organization, but they didn't. They basically referred her to another like-minded organization saying, we don't have a fit for you here, but maybe there's something you can do at another organization that we're working. So I think one of these things about the people lens is that it's also thinking beyond your organization. Is there anything that's with a similar mandate, partnering with other organizations to see how you can leverage this talent pool? And being open to that sharing of this resource. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Absolutely, it's a great idea. And I believe that Charity Village is going to be sending out a feedback form as well. So I hope that you can be honest and share any feedback that you have. This really is a work in progress. And so, we're learning as we go. We're changing the content all the time. We're trying to improve it. And so if you have comments or suggestions or anything like that, please be in touch. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be here today.
Great. And Lynda, thank you so much for everything you've shared with us today. I have learned a tremendous amount. The thing I really appreciate is I really liked your freeing up their future is a great line. And I'm definitely going to use that next time we have to talk about some of those difficult conversations. I think it's really about, you have to think about your organization to a mission, and sometimes that volunteer just isn't the right fit. And it's probably a better decision for everyone to free up their future. So that's one thing I'm taking away from today's session, in addition to the other great tips that you said. And I think for me that it's not about, the lens, it can seem overwhelming, all of those things to do, but I already identified a couple of things that this organization, that we already are doing. So we're on the path.
Yes.
So that it's not a complete overwhelming, I don't have to sit down and, do all these things, but we're getting there. And I think that the resources you said are going to help us get there a little bit quicker. So thank you.
Exactly.
And I'm looking forward to the book. And I just want to thank you. I think today on the International Volunteer Day, this is a great way to spend an hour thinking about how organizations can be a little bit more strategic and incorporate that people lens in their talent perspective. So thank you, and thank you to Vantage Point for sharing your insights with us today.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Just a reminder to everyone that our next Charity Village webinar will be on January 22nd. Our presenter will be Claire Kerr from Artes Interactive, and the topic will be Beyond the Buzzwords. We're going to be looking at ways to maximize effectiveness with social and mobile fundraising. So we look forward to that in the new year, already 2013. And we will follow up tomorrow with an email so that you can get a copy of today's presentation slides, as well as a copy of a recording of the session, and also a survey to give us your feedback in terms of how the session went today. So thanks to everyone on the line for participating today. And again, thank you, Lynda, for sharing your thoughts and insights with us today.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks again. Bye for now.